Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk. Today we have a special edition. I'm going to call this a new series called Drinking with Jay. I think we should have like a champagne bottle cork opening right about now. You know, Drinking with Jay. How are you, Jay?
I'm all right. How are you doing tonight, Ian?
Good, thanks. So we are actually drinking during this podcast, which is
Yeah.
probably completely unprofessional, but I thought this would be good because Jay Wynn is a home inspector and a friend of mine for many, many years. And we've always come up with our best ideas when we're sitting around with a glass of scotch or some homemade brew or something else going on. So I figured this would be appropriate.
Yeah, I've come up with some pretty bad ones too, though. So
Yeah, well, yeah, well, hey, they can't all be
let's
great
be
ideas.
honest. They all haven't been gems.
Yeah, but hey, this podcast is actually a gem, and we got this idea from we were drinking some homemade wine around a campfire, and we said, hey, this would be a great subject. But before we get into our subject, what are you drinking, Jay?
Actually, I am drinking a scotch that I found when we went over to Scotland. We went to the town of Peebles, and family rented a house out there. So I went to the main town there, and I walked into the liquor store, and I asked the guy for a scotch. I wanted something nice that I could drink down by the river. And he goes, "You American?" I said, "Yep." He goes, "You like bourbon?" I said, "Yep." And he handed me this scotch. He said, "This one's for you. It's called Glendronach. And it's about a 7-year-old scotch. It's moderately priced, and he was right. It's just a delicious scotch that I really, really enjoy. So that's what I got on deck tonight. A little Glendronach. How about you?
Glendronach. Okay. Well, I have what's called the Accidental Cask. So one of our previous guests, a mutual friend of ours, Thomas Kubiak, he gave me a bottle of this. So only Tom, you have to know Tom, he invested in a cask of scotch. Like, okay, I didn't know that was a thing. And so he has a bottle. So they give it to you cask strength. So if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's about 120 proof, depending on how old it is, a little bit more, a little bit less. It's the alcohol content that is ideal for aging, and it hasn't been watered down yet to bring it down to a palatable level. So this is the first time I think in my life I've actually added water to scotch. I usually drink it straight, just totally neat. And this time I'm like, woo, yeah, that burns. So I added a little bit, but it's delightful. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cast strength will get you if you're not careful.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
you got to
maybe
be.
the podcast will get a lot more interesting
I'll
as
bet.
this.
I'll bet after about an hour of this. So
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But tell us
because
about yourself, Jay. Tell us a little bit about your background, your home inspection business, that kind of stuff.
well, I'm not a real fan of talking about me, and I kind of take some of it for granted. But it does play into being a home inspector pretty well because I grew up in the trades, grew up around the trades, always been building, always been doing stuff, and I guess even from a real young age, I've always been attracted to it. I would hang out with my grandparents, hang out with my grandfathers in particular. They were always doing something, building something, fixing something. And when everybody else is going fishing or going doing whatever, I was down in the shop with them. So kind of took to it early, and my father was a union floor installer. So when I was very young, I started apprenticing with him. I worked summers with him all the way through till high school. And then in 11th grade, instead of staying in school, I went to the vocational program that was offered over in Saratoga, Warren, and I took their construction and building trades program, and I really, really loved it. So right out of high school, I just started in the trades. I started fixing buildings, and I got into, in particular, renovations and remodeling, which anybody in the trades know is a whole lot different than going in and building a nice new house from scratch. You get to
Yeah.
go into some real old places, and you get to work on old things, and you get to see a lot of unique problems. So did that for quite a while, and then about 8 years ago, for different reasons, I decided to make a career shift, and I had a friend that encouraged me to get into home inspections. So I finally listened to him and started doing that about 8 years ago. Took about 2 years to build it up. First year was spent working and building the home inspection business, but honestly, about a year and a half into it, I was pretty much a full-time home inspector. And then within 2 years, it was neat because I'd set a 5-year goal, but I actually hit my 5-year mark in 2 years. So 2 years into it, we quit construction, quit all renovation and remodeling, and just been doing home inspections 100% since. Haven't
Nice.
looked back.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can remember doing one of the first jobs that I ever did with you many, many years ago. You were putting up some paneling in some kids' room, and I don't know, I think I was refinishing some cabinets up in the kitchen. I'm like, I could hang out with this guy because you're like the complete opposite inspecting style. Like we have a very similar style. Like if you look at our reports, they follow the same pattern. We call out the same things in the same way. It's kind of funny. But when I walk into the room, I'm like, "Hey, everybody, what's going on? Let's talk." Welcome to your home inspection. You walk into the room, and everybody's like, "Did he steal my lunch money when we were kids?"
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
not the first person to say that, I'm afraid. But yeah, I tend to get very focused on the building,
Yeah.
which is what I'm there for, which is good. And I try to make that clear when I go in. I'm like, hey, don't take it personal. I really get into inspecting. So if I get real quiet, don't be alarmed, which is a good thing, you know.
But it's funny. People like that. Like when people talk about you, oh, he's so nice. I'm like, really? You didn't wonder? Does he is he carrying a gun or is he going to attack you? They're like, no, yeah, but that's what we liked about him.
Yeah, it's almost like, yeah, he's a pirate, but he's our pirate, so we're good with it, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
But it is. It's been good. It's been good for me. I've enjoyed it. I've liked. I really like it, and that's the thing. I really get a kick out of what I do. So I don't dread going to work. I like home inspecting. I like being in buildings. I like construction. I like seeing different things. So whether it's new construction and the stuff they're doing now with the techniques and then different materials being put into play, or it's a 150 or 200-year-old building, I mean, there's just always something neat to see. So I really, really like that. And then honestly, I do enjoy the people for the most part. Um, but we tend to focus on like the 10% that really annoy us, but 90% of the people are really good people. They're decent.
Yeah.
They're fun to be with. You can turn an inspection into either a really stressful, nerve-wracking experience, or you can all have a little bit of fun with it. And I think over the years, I've kind of learned to lighten up and have a little bit of fun with it too.
Yeah.
So,
And it's funny you mention that because that's actually a nice lead into our subject because we do focus on I say 1%. It's 1 out of 100. There's an old home inspector in our area, Larry McGann, and he's retired now. But I remember him years ago saying 1 out of 100 clients are just complete turds. He doesn't hold back words. Complete turds. But you know what? That's the one you focus on. So then you think the other 99 are too. And it's not really true. But cutting down on that 1 out of 100 that pops in is very important. So that's why we talked about this podcast theme of firing clients and blacklisting agents. And I love the title of that because it's just so aggressive. And I can hear the heart stop of home inspectors as they're driving in their truck listening to this podcast right now. Because
yeah.
first of all, I don't think we fire enough clients. But second of all, I think I might have been the first home inspector in our area to start blacklisting agents. I don't know because I remember I started doing it and everybody was like freaking out. They're like, "You blacklisted them?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't need that. I don't need that stuff going on, man. It brings too much trouble." But
Yep.
do you find that in our industry, maybe sometimes we don't fire agents and clients enough?
I really do. The fact of the matter is, and this is something that I learned even in construction, um, there were days when we had no work, things were dry, things were tight, and you would take any job that came along. And then you realized that the person you were working for wasn't worth leaving your home to be with. They were
Yeah.
just absolutely obnoxious. And at some point you hit the wall where you're like, I just should have stayed in bed. That would have been a better use of my time. I wouldn't be sick to my stomach right now. I wouldn't have this individual nagging me and on my back, pointlessly, by the way. We're not talking about legitimate conversations. We're not talking about legitimate complaints or the things that come up. We're talking about the type of person that we've all run into before, where you look at the person and you go, how can you be this miserable chronically and still breathe air? Just that. Seriously, it's like there are some people out there that are just absolutely miserable human beings. And I think, one, we don't say, well, it's
No, I'm
like
just
we have,
laughing because the scotch is kicking in. I think.
no, actually not. I've had a wee sip. I'm just, I was thinking of an individual in particular that when I was doing construction just made me livid. So, and,
Was it me,
but
Jay?
no, it wasn't.
I'm teasing.
Um, but you just realize that there are some people that are not worth working with, and then the trick is to start identifying them, figure out what their tells are, because most of the time, if you stop and you dissect the situation, you can go, oh yeah, here was a sign, here was another sign, here was another sign, and you start putting it together, and then you can start kind of predicting when somebody's going to be very difficult. And there are some indicators I found, you know, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But it's funny Larry said 1 in 100 because actually I have found the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because I will track people that call back, whether it's a major complaint or a minor complaint. And you know what? It is about 1 in 100. And then, maybe once a year, one of those will turn into a serious issue that I've got to address. So Larry was pretty spot on. But if you're doing 2, 3, 400 inspections a year, that's a lot of headaches. So if you can get rid of those people, you can cut out a lot of the stress that we experience.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned how basically those are the people you don't want to get out of bed and be around, but there's also a financial consequence. I remember years ago, I did an inspection, and the agent just something didn't set right with me. So, $500 for the inspection, went on home. This is like maybe 13, 14 years ago. And it turned into days, weeks, even a couple few months of just craziness. Ian, we need you to comment on this email from FHA. We need you to comment on this and doing this and then re-explaining things. And then it was just, it was insane. So I calculated the hours. I made less than minimum wage on that inspection with all the hours and time I put into it. Not to mention, to be honest with you, I can't let things go. I care about what I do. So it's hard for me to let things go. And if you care about what you do, that's going to rattle around in your brain a little bit and it bothers you. So I also lost work because of that because now I'm spending 2 hours on the phone with this agent who became a problem instead of spending 2 hours in a real estate office or spending 2 hours on an inspection. So
Yeah.
there's a
No,
cost factor.
there is. Your emotional health takes a toll. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting paradoxes of what we do is that to be a good inspector, you have to care about what you do.
Yeah.
You have to put something of your soul and your heart into it. But then if you are emotionally attached, when you have conflict, when you have difficulties, when you have complaining people, it takes a part of you too. And so, the guys that just emotionally divorce from it, frankly, burn out, lose their edge, and they're not very good inspectors. But on the other hand, people that invest so much emotionally into it, those guys burn out bad too. So you kind of got to walk a line with it. And I think that's why finding these people and identifying them is so important. Um, I don't know about you, but my patience is limited. It's like a resource. I only have so many hours in the day. I only have so much patience. I only have so much mental energy I can devote to something. So if I can find somebody that's not going to needlessly sap that and make them disappear before I ever have to deal with them, that's money saved. That's time saved. That's heartache saved. And to me, that's a win. But I don't think anybody expresses it that way. I think we're so focused on building our business and getting agents and referring agents. Like we work so hard to get a referral from an agent that we have this idea that every one of those is solid gold. But the fact is some of them just aren't worth working with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny. Do we want to be McDonald's or do we want to be the fancy restaurant where you have to call ahead? And so there's a restaurant down the road from me. I called it one day and I said, "Hey, I'd like to make reservations for Friday." It was like Monday or Tuesday. They said, "Which Friday?" I'm like, "Oh, this can't be good." I had to make reservations 3 weeks out for this place. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was fantastic. It's not something you go to on a Thursday night. It's a special occasion kind of place, but fantastic. I had to give them all this information. If I missed my reservation, I'd, I'd lose my ability to make another reservation for like a year or two. Like it was insane, but I did it. But now, so they're picky about who they serve, and
Yep.
rightfully so. They're boutique. But
Yep.
now McDonald's, I just go up there, and that's why you see these videos online of people throwing shakes back at the poor worker making minimum wage because they just
Yep.
take every client. So we get the
Yep.
proverbial milkshake thrown in our face when we take every client. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. It's like there's guys out there where they want to compete on price, basically follow the McDonald's or you could say the Walmart business model. But that means you have to deal with everyone and all the complaints and all the whining. I honestly would rather charge twice as much and do half the inspections. You think about it. If you have 1 in 100 that's a problem, you do 100 inspections to make your wage. Why don't you charge double? You know, do 50 inspections, and then maybe every 2 years you have to deal with something like this, or however your period is. I'm not saying do 50 in a year, but you get the point.
yeah,
This kind of let's charge more. Let's weed out the people we don't want to work with, and let's spend our time and energy where it does good, with people that care and respect what we do. And I think that's another reason that people don't fire agents, is they don't necessarily appreciate the value of what we're doing as inspectors.
It's talking on that point of why inspectors don't blacklist agents. Agents are the quote unquote gateway to the home inspector. But you and I both know that there's a lot of agents out there. And we are, how do I put this? We are more pivotal in the real estate industry than we give ourselves credit for. And I'll give
Yep.
an example. So I blacklisted an agent years ago. It was not pretty. Like calling on the phone, screaming at me after inspections, whether she was the buyer's or seller's agent. I really don't know what was going on. It was around the same time I blacklisted this other guy who was just causing trouble too and just making all sorts of difficulties. But what ended up happening when I blacklisted them, particularly this one agent, she called back to apologize because what was happening was, you know, you do, let's say you're a home inspector, you do 500 inspections a year. That agent likely only does 10. Or let's say they're a high producing agent, they do 100. You're doing way more inspections than they're selling deals. So now, if you're the premier agent in the area, you're not going to compete with the premier home inspector. So, what was happening was clients were saying, "Hey, I called Ian to do my inspection, and he said his company won't do business with you." Now, they lost referrals, they lost their edge. That started hurting their business. She apologized. And, it wasn't like this whole, hey, just start working with my clients again. She's like, you know what? I was in the wrong. I got this weird power trip, blah, blah, blah. Can you lift the blacklist? Sure. The other guy, he just ended up losing business. He wouldn't do a thing. It didn't bother me because it didn't affect my workload. We have more power in the industry than we give ourselves credit for as home inspectors.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. I think it takes some time to build to that point, and I think a lot of young guys get in the habit of working with everybody. And I say young, I mean starting out in the
Yeah.
business, young, wet behind the ears, not established. But you reach a certain point where, yeah, you start realizing what you bring to the table and what you're actually contributing to the transaction and what you were contributing to your clients.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when you walk into a house that they're absolutely in love with and they are blown away and they're just so excited to be there, and you're like, okay, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but your foundation wall is blowing out. There's powder post beetles that have eaten through the main beams in this place. You've got a major mold issue in the attic, and this lovely bay window has been leaking for 10 years. You've just disclosed and found 30, 40, $50,000 worth of problems maybe for a fee of what, 500 bucks? You know,
Yeah.
we are saving people money. We're keeping them from investing, making the biggest purchase of their life and putting it in the money pit. I mean, we bring a lot to the table. And to do that, we have to be incredibly well trained. I kind of took for granted when I started this exactly what a home inspector had to know and how good we had to be. After a couple of years of doing this, I thought, wow, not only is this a hard job, it's a needed job. And maybe I'm patting us all on the back, but I've seen guys that can do it. I've seen guys that can't. And there's actually very few guys that I think are good inspectors. So I don't think we fully appreciate sometimes what we're contributing to the real estate transaction and what we're giving to our client as far as service. And that's important. And then once you get your reputation as being the guy that sees things, the guy that takes care of his people, the guy that has your back, then yeah, once that reputation gets out there and people want to work with you, if you say, I won't work with this agent for whatever reason, I found them unprofessional, I found this, or even if you say, I prefer not to work with this agent because of stuff that's happened in the past, at some point that agent's going to go, wow, this is hurting,
Mm-hmm.
because it does.
And I think the big thing, I think you kind of brought me back to reality of a little bit there. It's easy for me and you to say that, hey, we're blacklisting this agent because we're
Mm-hmm.
established businesses. So when it comes down to it, though, even a new guy should consider blacklisting agents because there's a good way to start off your business and a bad way to start off your business. A bad way to start off your business is working with agents that don't have the same values as you do. And I see it all the time. It's interesting when we look at our referring agents. I look at the agents that refer me and they think like me. Ian, I don't care if this house fails. I want to make sure that they're in a good house. Those are the type of agents that refer me. Then I see some other inspectors that, we're not going to name names, obviously, but I'm like, a little bit sleazy, maybe not maybe doing as well as they could. And then I see the same agents with that same thought process of just getting the deal done. They're the ones who refer that home inspector. We're going to find our niche. And the reality of it is simple math. Say your goal is to do 1,000 inspections. You just want to be a crazy busy single man operator. The average agent is going to refer about 10 inspections per year. That's about how many we get on average from our agents. So
Mm-hmm.
you need 100 agents. In our market here in upstate New York, there are over 4,000 agents. I don't need 3,900 of those agents to like me. They can hate me. I only need 100 of them to like me to have 1,000 inspections. And you're going to be a crazy busy inspector. You should be multi-inspector at that point if you're shooting for that. So it's even less. If you want 200 inspections a year, you need 20 referring agents. That's not hard to get. It doesn't matter if some agents don't like you. And the turnover rate for a real estate agent is a lot higher than the turnover rate for a home inspector. So that agent you see now might not be here next year.
You know, you hit a nice point with that. It says it's okay if some agents don't like you. I would take that a step further and say it's really good if some agents don't like you.
Yeah.
Uh, when we talk about blacklisting, there's one caution that I'd say, whether you're a veteran or you're just starting out. I would say, um, make sure you take your ego out of it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't sit there and say, "Well, this person got in my face, so I'm just going to sit there. I'm going to never do any business with them." You know, sometimes as home inspectors, we get legitimate feedback from real estate agents, and we should take it and we
Oh
should
yeah.
listen to it. I'm not talking about constructive criticism. I'm not talking about observations. I'm not talking about things that they say that could help us improve what we do. To be honest with you, some of the best feedback I ever got was from agents that said, "You know what? You might have been right, but your manner of delivery was way off, and you scared these people," or "You didn't write that up strong enough, and my attorney's having a hard time fighting." And it was legitimate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sensitive about things and you're just leading with your ego, that's going to hurt. But if you take legitimate criticism and feedback, I think you're going to take years off your learning curve and be a better inspector. But if you have certain agents that don't like you, that probably means you're doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about one. We did this marketing campaign. We were offering a new service. We decided that we would send out an email to our top 100 agents, top 100 referring agents, offering a discount for a new service that we were rolling out, just to kind of let them know we were doing it, get things going, put it on their recommend to-do list. Well, we sent this to one in particular, and I got the nastiest, meanest email I have ever gotten from somebody. It was loaded with profanities. It was, "How dare you contact me, you blankety blankety blank. You are a blank blank. I hate you." You know, it says, "You cost me," and this was in his email. He said, "You cost me over $50,000 on a house, and there was nothing wrong with it. So you are this. Everybody that I talk to says you're this. We all hate you. Take me off this list." And I looked at that email and I go, "Wow, he's really upset." So I pulled up the inspection report, and it was this, "Oh, this guy." And come to find out, it was a flip. It was a flip, and the flipper owned the house, and he was also the listing agent. And he had tried every trick in the book to cover over major, major, major problems. And we caught him.
Mm-hmm.
We caught him, and we called him out. And my report said very specifically what we found, to the point where he couldn't refute it. Um, so in that case, if he hates my guts and all of the people he does business with hate my guts and they think I'm the worst person in the world, I think that's a win. Because I don't want anything to do with them in a business standpoint. And I want those people to shake when they see me coming as an inspector because they know they're not going to get away with it.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, especially the part that you mentioned about not leading with your ego, because that can happen. Sometimes we get a little sensitive. I'm just going to blacklist this person, blacklist it. Maybe they're trying to help. And that's how we grow is, hey, you know what? They said we called this out and somebody looked at it afterwards, an engineer, and he said we were wrong. I like to know about that stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
how was I wrong? Tell me about that. That's how we learn. But when we're talking about blacklisting agents, I've been blacklisted too. I have entire offices in the area that have completely blacklisted us. We won't work with them. They're too thorough. I'm like, is that what
Hmm.
you, and those were their words. Is that what you tell their clients? Like, hey, we can't recommend Ian or his company there because they're too thorough. If I were a buyer, I'm like, hang on a second. So you're going to recommend somebody that's less thorough?
Yep.
What kind of service are you providing? But either way, never put a dent. Even when I was first starting out, never put a dent in my business. I just moved on to the next set of agents. But let's get into the nuts and bolts, Jay, because what are
Sure.
some things we can do when we blacklist an agent to do it professionally, to make sure we're not leading with our ego and still not alienate the rest of the market? Because I think that's what guys actually worry about the most. You know, small community, real estate, and everybody talks, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera. How can we do it professionally?
So I apply what I kind of think of as the baseball rule. Three strikes and you're out. And so that means I'll give agents chances. And I'm not looking I'm looking for a few things. I'm not looking for some. One of the things I'm looking for is how do they deal with issues as they're presented? We find major concerns. What do they do with it? Do they contact quality contractors to take care of their people, or do they get some pocket man that's going to do anything they say or want to do just to move a deal through? So who do they contact? How do they take care of their people? That's one of the things I'm looking for. Um, One of the things, and I just say that because I've been on inspections where it was obvious problems and, trying to take care of my clients, and the agent has a contractor in his back pocket or a septic guy in his back pocket that will pass anything because he knows he has no liability but wants to keep getting referrals from this agent. So the feedback is inevitably, well, my guy said you were wrong. So I look for guys like that. And when I say the three strikes and you're out rule, I don't mean mistakes. I don't mean issues that come up. I don't mean confusions. I mean, in my mind, those are actually chances to shine.
Mm-hmm.
Mistakes happen. Problems come up. Miscommunications happen. How you deal with them demonstrates your character. If I catch somebody being deliberately sleazy or unethical, that will be a different story. But generally speaking, I try to give people a lot of leeway and a lot of space before I say I'm not working with you anymore. So
Yeah, I think you're a little bit more lenient than me. I don't give them three strikes. I usually go by the level of what they're doing. Like, so I remember one, and I think I called you right after this one because I couldn't believe what was going on, and we like to tell each other stories after something
yeah,
crazy happens. So I'm up on this roof, and I'm looking, and I said, "Hey, there's no kickout flashing here. This is a problem." As I'm up there, the agent walks up and says, "Get off of that roof." The seller says, "You can't be on that roof," and she's in the front yard. There's like a neighborhood. I don't want to say a party, but it was like a little neighborhood get together, and all the people are watching. She's yelling at me from the ground. So I got down, and she kind of threw a fit through the whole inspection, going on and on about how I shouldn't have been on the roof. Walking on the roof damages it, yada, yada, yada. So I knew these buildings, and I knew what was happening. So I said, hang on, there's a little attic access in the garage. Let me go take a look. And I go, huh, interesting. She goes, you can't tell me this place is immaculate. And then she stopped right there as I just shined my light up, and there was just wood rot all running down the side of this wall. Easy, like 6, 7 Ks worth of damage because there was interior damage and everything. And she just literally walked out. So she did create other issues later on. Like she was getting upset at the level of work that the contractor wanted to do. I shouldn't have been on the roof anyways, even though I found the defect. You know, her, it was one strike and I let it go.
okay,
But I did it very respectfully. And I think that's the key. I didn't get upset. I didn't tell her she was getting blacklisted. And it helps that I have a call center because I use America's call centers. We've had them on the show here. And I just said, if anybody calls with this agent who's either the listing agent or the buyer's agent, just kindly pass on that inspection. So when people call, I don't say, I don't work with her, this and that, she's a terrible person. I don't even tell them the story. Nobody can connect the story to her except her. She's listening. And if she's listening to this show, why are you listening to an Inspector podcast? But just really respectful, no name bashing, just move on with life.
Yeah.
So when people call now, it's just like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that inspection. Have a great day. Oh, okay, thank you. That's it. Once in a blue
Yeah.
moon, somebody will push the issue and they'll email me, Ian, why won't you do our inspection? What about this? What about that? You did an inspection for my father-in-law. And I'm like, hey, well, and I still stay respectful. We won't work with that particular agent. That's as far as I've ever said it. We won't work with that particular agent, but I'm sure you're in good hands with another home inspector. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good approach, and I think that's some of the new inspectors or even older inspectors' fear is that they're going to alienate the real estate community. But the fact is, I don't think any of us blacklist an agent lightly, and we don't
Yeah.
do it frequently. And this is the thing, we're talking about it, but I can think of maybe 5 agents off the top of my head that I don't want to work with. And at this point, after 8 years, I couldn't even tell you. I've probably worked with 1,500, maybe 2,000 different agents,
Hmm.
either listing side or the buyer's side. So it is a very, very small number, and it's not something done lightly. Um,
But it has to be done, and
it does
I
have to be.
and I think that's the point. If you didn't blacklist those 5 agents, you would be in a world of just unhappiness. So now you've taken
Well,
that from 1 out of 100 to maybe 1 out of 200, and you can kind of live life a little
yeah,
easier.
yeah, and that's huge. The other thing too is that I just lost my thought.
That's okay. David will edit it out.
Oh, yeah. There are certain agents that generate a tremendous amount of emails and client just fuzz. Um, a few years ago, I learned about something called the 80-20 rule or the 20-80 rule. You try to figure out what 20% of whatever you're doing produces 80% of the results, or in converse, you figure out if you can figure out where 80% of your stress is coming from what 20%, you let it go. And I found that there were some agents that were causing most of my feedback, not feedback, but negative emails, most of my complaints, most callbacks to clients, most difficulty with contractors, and I was able to narrow it down to just a couple of agents.
Hmm.
So I was looking at the business they were giving me versus the headaches they were generating, and it just wasn't worth it. So that was another standard too, is that I probably cut my complaints down 90% by letting go of 2 agents in particular. And it was just tracking the numbers and seeing, when a complaint comes in, who was the client? Okay, what was the inspection like? Who was the buying agent? Who was the listing agent? And when you start seeing that pattern develop too, you can start identifying that there are certain people that they're just generating headaches, and it's just not worth it at some point.
Yeah,
So that
and
was another.
yeah, and just going back to the point you made before too, it's just like any other industry. There's always going to be an annoying person and a great person standing in the same room in the same industry. You just want to hang out with a great person. If you can get rid of the people that are causing most of the headache, perfect. That's great. Then you just solved a huge problem in your life. We're not
Yeah,
saying that every agent is bad. Matter of fact, most agents we work with in our area are fantastic. I love the agents we work with. You
yeah,
know, some of them I've known for many, many years, and they've helped me out in situations. I help them out, and they take good care of their clients. But we got to get rid of some of the bad eggs. And
yeah,
going back to the point that I talked about before about agents who are kind of a little sleazy also tend to refer the sleazy home inspector to. They also tend to attract the clients that are problems. Problem agents tend to attract problem clients. So let's talk about clients for a little bit. So
sure.
blacklisting an agent is the big one. That's the hardest thing to do. But
Yep.
at the same time, firing a client is not done enough either. And I find that, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of guys are like, well, there's no evidence. Or I didn't have enough evidence to fire them. There was nothing really crazy going on. But the opportunity really hadn't presented itself yet. Why do you think we should, before the evidence presents itself, in other words, before there's a big problem after an inspection, should we consider firing clients, even if we're slow?
Even if we're slow, because again, it comes down to they're just not worth the time and the investment. It's certainly not worth the money, but it's not worth the emotional investment. Um, there are people that will latch onto you and just drain you. And I don't know, but things keep getting crazier. I like going home. I like, being able to rest. And if you love what you do, as we talked about earlier, when people do that, it takes something from you. It takes a bit of your peace away. It takes a bit of your sanity away. And you're never going to get rid of them all. You're always going to find one or two that slip through. But I have also found that they typically show some signs and some indications that they are going to be a problem. I have a file in my computer marked potential problem clients. And if I do. I work with somebody that's particularly difficult. I will take a PDF copy of that inspection report, shoot it right over, quick description of what they were like, the mannerisms that I noticed, different little things, and then I wait and see if it develops. And fortunately, in the last few years, I've been able to catch them prior to, but previously, I wasn't able to spot them, and I would, sure enough, pull it up. Oh yeah, on site they did this, they said this, they acted like this, and they were a problem later. So you starting to identify some of the markers ahead of time, or you can, if you look close enough.
Yeah, and I think we need to delineate when we actually fire a client. So there's
Mm-hmm.
firing a client when they first contact us. I think that's the easy one. They start asking, "Do you have E&O insurance? Can I get a copy of that? How much are you insured for?" There's some red
Yep.
flags. That's when you refer them to your competition. Say, go back to
Yep.
Google and find somebody else. Those are
Yep.
some pretty clear ones. Or if we're answering our own phones, and I think my call center there, America's call center, I think they do a good job of screening out some of the more difficult people for the most part. But
Yep.
the hardest part of firing a client is either just before or on the inspection. I
Yeah.
think that's where it's hard. And I never did that enough. So I had a client many, many years ago, probably another 13 years ago, and they said, "We want all these tests on our water system and our well and the water purity system and everything." Tests that I had never even heard of. We'd have to special order them out of state. It was going to be several $100s just in lab results. And they kept asking questions and questions and questions and being really difficult about it. Like, not just saying, "Hey, we want to be healthy. Can you help us explain this?" Just being very difficult about it. That should have been my first sign, and I didn't fire them. So I spent hours on this, days actually, and then they're like, "Oh, we just moved on to a different house." So they hired me, and the agent, as I pulled up, said, "You should have fired these people." And I'm like, "Geez." And he was right, because he actually, after that inspection, he let them go. But they caused nothing but problems. 10-year-old roof, beautiful condition. They tried to sue me afterwards because they said the roof was bad. Never went anywhere. They were just trying to see if they could just make trouble and get some free money out of it. They made all sorts of other troubles, call me up, yelling at me, you know, silly things. Nothing ever actually wrong, but it was just weeks and weeks of that and stress. You know, it just wasn't worth it. What I should have done is, after the agent told me that, stopped the inspection and said, "Listen, whatever it takes, we'll get you a new inspector. I don't think I'm the right guy for you."
Yeah.
And I've done that. Have you done that, Jay? Have you ever stopped an inspection and let a client go?
So I have recently, actually. A little bit different situation. The people weren't being disagreeable per se, but I got there and it was a for sale by owner. And when I got there, the woman said that, she has full permission. Everything's good. We're good for the inspection. I went up and I knocked on the door, and the seller didn't realize we were doing an inspection that day because she'd never been informed. And come to find out, the buyer hadn't bothered to communicate to her that we were coming. So she hadn't cleaned the house. She was nervous. She was embarrassed. And then while I'm talking with the seller, I found out that they didn't even, in fact, have a signed contract. So there was no real estate professionals. They decided not to use any agents. At this point, they wanted me to do a home inspection with no signed real estate contract. And then the lady I was working for, who was actually a very nice lady, kept saying, "Well, what I need you to do is give me estimates for what it's going to take to get the house the way I like." And I says, "Well, I don't actually offer estimates because I'm not going to be the person doing the work." Well, she said it again through the course of the conversation. And then as I'm looking at the house, I can see that, the seller, she says, I told her everything that was wrong with it. And I says, "Oh, so you mean like the front porch that's collapsing?" Well, no. About the chimney that's failing? Well, no. So the seller wasn't fully upfront with disclosing things.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer didn't really want a home inspection. She wanted estimates to fix the entire house. She didn't have a signed contract, so there was no agreement there that bound anybody to anything. And the service I was going to offer was not what she was looking for. So I ended up looking at her and I said, you know what, ma'am? I said, I appreciate you wanting me to take a look at this, but I'm really not the person that you want. You want an estimator to come out and look at this house for you, somebody that will actually do the work, somebody that can put numbers to it. I realize this is disappointing, but I don't think you are going to be happy with me taking your money because I am not going to give you what you're looking for. You need to go this route. Now, I lost an inspection appointment. I could have been out and I could have made, whatever on another inspection. But I also dropped just a huge headache. And
Mm-hmm.
I know it was making because of all the different scenarios or the different factors that were leading up to it that I could see. I could just see it coming. So I just respectfully and politely said, you need somebody else? I shook her hand. I said, I wish you best of luck. I got in my car and I drove away. So,
And sometimes they're not always as clear cut as these two situations you and I just brought out. But I remember you one time saying, trust your gut, because your gut's usually your subconscious picking up on things that you're not paying attention to. And it's true. I had one where I fired the client because it was not a safe house. It was not safe structurally, and the people in there were not safe to be with. It was in a bad part of town. So I said they weren't a problem client, but I'm like, listen, I don't think I'm the right guy for you. This is what I see, and I don't think I can do the inspection today. And I've fired lots of clients over the years. I've never had a problem with a client firing me. Never had a bad review or anything, because you never want to walk in there with ego and aggression and already on defense. Address it,
yeah.
pull yourself out of it because you haven't done any work yet, and say, okay, something's not right here. Let me pull myself out of this and say what will make them happy and get them on their feet. So
Yeah.
getting them on their feet is, oh, okay, I'm letting you know this now. You don't have to pay me, or I'll return the fee, and we'll get
Mm-hmm.
you a home inspector that's maybe more comfortable with this situation. So
Yeah.
trust your gut. I like that expression because I remember you telling me a story. You pulled up to an inspection one time and turned out it wasn't a really good situation. I don't remember all the details. And then afterwards, you're like, man, I feel good leaving that. And it turned out it was a little bit of a worse situation. Guy out there was drinking. Do you remember the situation now?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I arrived on an inspection a little bit early. It was out near the Massachusetts border, an area I don't typically cover a whole lot. It was up in one of the hill towns. And I got there early and I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Jay. I'm doing the home inspection. Thank you for getting us in. And he immediately started getting aggressive and confrontational. Um, so I said, okay, well, I understand that it's intrusive and invasive, but here's what I'm here to do. And then he starts, well, you're not going in here. You're not doing this. And he starts swearing. And his body language starts getting exaggerated. He starts waving his hands and flailing his arms and like reaching over and picking up like a piece of pipe that he had laying there. And he's getting increasingly aggressive and hostile. And I hadn't even started the inspection yet.
Yeah.
So I'm reading this guy's body language and I'm like, this is something is wrong here. So I said, you know what? I says, let's just wait till the agent and the client get here, and then we'll go through and we'll do the inspection. I was walking around the side of the house, and his son and grandson were present, and I just made a comment. I says, well, I'm sorry to agitate you. I'm sorry that the gentleman inside is getting upset. And this was a big dude I was talking to. I'm 5'9", I'm 200 pounds. I'm not very physically intimidating. This guy was like 6'5" and probably 240, maybe 250, and just a big old country boy. And the fact that the old man was getting agitated, he looked like a school kid. He's like, oh, well, I don't know I don't want him. I can't control him. I can't. And he started getting real agitated and scared that the old man was upset. And I just kept looking at things and reading body language, and I said, this situation is not good. Buyer's agent showed up, and I says, seller's here. He's agitated. I'm not going to do this inspection today. There's just all sorts of red flags here. We're not doing it. And he kind of said, well, we need this. I said, no, we're not doing this. So I shut it down, got in my car, started to drive away. I figured out of courtesy, I would call the listing agent and explain that the next inspector that comes there, the seller really shouldn't be present for. And the listing agent made me aware that that particular individual had some emotional issues that maybe he hadn't been regulating.
Mm.
So, yeah. And so he said, you know what, I think he's off his medication and this and that. He's not a bad guy, but, which is all the more reason not to push the situation. So the red flags were there. By all rights, we could have said, we're doing the inspection. You agreed to it. You signed the contract. But my gut was going, something is wrong here. And after the fact, I found out that we did actually have an emotionally troubled individual. And, if I'd stayed there and started doing the inspection and found something, God only knows what his reaction would have been.
Mm.
So we shut it down. It was, one time it was just, and it wasn't the buyer. It was, I'm not doing this because my gut says we're done.
I think that illustrates too. There's more than one reason that we have to quote unquote fire a client. Sometimes it's not the client themselves. Sometimes it is. I've fired clients because, you know what, they are not the type of person I want to work with. I had one who wanted me to make up defects. I'm like, this isn't going to work. He's like, yeah, no, it's not. I'm like, I'm going to go. He's like, okay, I'll find someone else. And he just leave.
Yep.
But then there's also the situation around it. Do you really want to be at that house? So both the stories we just told had nothing really to do with the client, had everything to do with the
No.
situation. So sometimes we have to fire a client because of the situation or the home that they're buying,
Yeah.
and we have to let them go.
Yes.
So there is a chance where you could get a bad review or something like that. But at the end of the day, I have never felt bad about letting a client go. If I've ever got that inclination, I've always felt good afterwards. I felt relief.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'll share with you because that actually happened to me. Um, Client called. He asked for an inspection that was way outside my normal coverage area. And when I explained that to him, he says, but, given your reviews and everybody says you're excellent, and I really want you to look at it, and it's everything. I want you to do the house, the pest inspection, radon, water sample, well flow, septic, basically everything that we could offer. So I said, well, if you are doing all of these inspections, I'll make an exception, and I'll come down to the area. So it was pretty straightforward. I actually had this both on the phone and in an email communication. If you're doing all these inspections, I'll come to the area. And I figured I'll lose money because I'm going to lose the afternoon inspection, but it's a nice trip, and why not, right?
Yeah.
Well, about maybe 4 days before the inspection, he contacts me and says, oh, I got great news. The seller's going to replace the entire septic, so you can take that off. And I don't need a well flow now, and we're going to drop the radon. So you just come down and do the home inspection. So that's not what we agreed.
Yeah.
I made it very clear where my position was and why I would do this. So I contacted him and I says, I understand if they're not doing it, fine. But our agreement was contingent on me doing all of these inspections and offering these services. So frankly, it's not worth my time to travel down there just for the home inspection. Well, he blew up. He and he was a keyboard commando. So he decided that he was going to try to run my reviews down and badmouth me, and he went on every platform he could do, and he just started, I can't believe this man left me in the lurch like this, and just over and over and over again. So he actually did write me a bunch of bad reviews. But my attitude was, I'd rather him write me bad reviews about a service I did not perform than have to deal with this guy nagging and complaining that I missed a spider web in the attic for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of person he was. Okay. And the nice thing about Google and a lot of these reviews is you can do a little background check a lot of times on who's writing the review. And he actually had a pattern of I don't know whether you call it cyberbullying or not, but his pattern was to go into a business, demand something outrageous, and then get online and run them to the ground until they gave him what he wanted. So it was pretty easy to figure out who he was and what he was doing. So I'll take that bad review every day, all day long, because it's just, those are the kind of people I absolutely do not want to do business with.
I remember you telling me about that one, and I looked him up, and he had never given a good review to anyone. You're like, Ian, can you check out this guy? And I look, he had done nothing but leave bad reviews all over the internet for everyone. So cyberbullying. And I remember looking, it was like one place he was mad at the tacos that he got. I'm like, how angry of a person are you that you're just this upset about tacos? I'm like, it's a little taco shack in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, how bad could it have been that you're getting, like, it wasn't a pleasant review. So But you trusted your gut and you let the client go. Fortunately, it wasn't at the inspection. So I would say before the inspection is always easier. If you can nip it in the bud right when they first contact, perfect.
Yeah.
Halfway
So
to the inspection, that's a little harder. At the inspection, that's always the hardest.
yeah. So, and then some of the things that I've learned to identify prior to the inspection, and you actually talked about one. If they ask you to write major defects before you even looked at the house,
Yeah,
that's always a flag.
yeah.
When I first started doing this, it was probably my 10th, maybe 12th inspection. I had a woman, she was so excited to use me. She wanted to look at this house. It was beautiful. But then in an email, she says, and when we're there in your report, you're going to fail the roof because I want a slater to look at it. You are going to call out the electrical panel because I want an electrician in there. You are going to call out an engineer because I want the whole structure evaluated. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, no, 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 no,
Red
we're not
flag
doing
after
this.
red flag. Yeah.
Red flag after red flag. So I sent a very polite, well, I thought it was a polite email. Maybe it was a tad aggressive, but I just said, ma'am, I don't know if you're aware of this, but what you're asking me to do is unethical and frankly, I believe illegal. So I'm not going to do this inspection. I says, I'm sorry, you'll have to find somebody else. She blew up my computer. She sent me a bunch of nasty emails trying to say, that's not what I was asking. You're misinterpreting it. You're this. But I had the email. I had it in words. So I called her up and I figured I'll talk with her. Just see what's going on. I will talk with her. Come to find out, she'd actually had a bad inspection in the past. She blamed her home inspector for missing what she says was tens of thousands of dollars worth of defects. She didn't want the same thing to happen, and she was very sorry that I took it this way. But what I was hearing was the last guy worked me over. I hate him. I hate all inspectors, and you're going to pay for what he did to me. That's what I kept hearing as she's talking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, at the end of it, I just said politely she was going to be looking to do business with somebody else, and we just weren't a good fit. So sometimes you just got to say no and look for those red flags. And that's a huge one. If they ask you to do something unethical or illegal, there may be guys out there that do it, but it's not me.
Yeah. So, as always, there may be somebody you may be listening to the show right now and think, I don't have problems like that. I take every client, I take every agent, and I never have problems. Good for you. That's awesome. We're not saying that you should go out there and start firing agents and firing clients, but if you do enough volume over the years, it's something that you should really consider adding to your repertoire. I
Yeah.
remember a home inspector recently telling me, I never have problems. I love everybody. I'm like, but hang on a second. Didn't this person just send their attorney after you? Oh, yeah, well, that was just one letter out of 100. I'm like, okay. Then what about this person? Well, yeah, but that was like 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, well, hang on. So you don't love everybody, and not everybody was a great client.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have to let people go. Always be
Yeah.
polite, always be respectful. But we got talking about this again over scotch and a campfire. And one of the
Yep.
best things we've ever done business wise is number one, blacklist a couple of agents that aren't worth it. Number two, let a few clients go, no matter how slow we might be. And a lot of guys are slow right now, but it's for your own health, for your own business. Be the fancy restaurant that rejected me, and not McDonald's who'll just take every client and get a milkshake thrown in your face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but this kind of ties into a lot of stuff that we've talked about over in campfires, and a lot of it ties into how you want to run your business. How do you build to the point where you can be selective? What do you want from your home inspection business? So
Mm-hmm.
it really dovetails into a lot of other things too. But I agree. A lot of guys should be ready and willing to let people go much sooner than they do. And this is the other thing too, is that you've certainly heard the adage, well, the customer's always right. But I don't have customers. I have clients. And the difference being is I am a highly qualified professional, and they are coming to me for my experience, for my advice, for my observations, and for what I will document. I am the one that's going to run that show. And if it sounds arrogant, I do apologize for that, but that's the facts. I don't go to my doctor and tell him what procedures he's going to do or what medications he's going to give me. I don't go to a lawyer and tell him what laws he's going to write for me or how he's going to fill things out. These are professionals that I rely on, and it's the same thing when I'm doing their inspection. I'm the qualified professional, and it's going to be this way, and that's why. So that's why, in my mind, I don't have customers, I have clients. And I like working with people that understand that. They get excellent service. I take care of them. I watch out for them. I'll watch out for them for years after the fact. I take care of my agents. I really try to do right by everybody. But at the end of the day, that's where I kind of take my base position on. So if I meet somebody that thinks they're going to be uh, running the show or bullying me or having me do what I'm told, that's not a good fit. And I think other inspectors really, I would like to see other inspectors develop that attitude. I think it will improve our industry a whole lot.
Yeah, and I think that's a great illustration. We don't go and tell our doctor. Well, hopefully we don't tell our doctor what to do. Um, we don't start yelling at them and leaving them bad reviews when we think they gave us, a bad physical or whatever. It's a profession. We're not
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's. So, I'm actually running a little bit low on scotch, Jay, but I tell you
All
what,
right.
this has been a fun podcast. And agree with us or not, Jay's done really well in business. I think I've done halfway decent in business too. Sometimes, in our opinion, anyways, let a few agents go, let a few clients go, sit back, have a glass of scotch with Jay, and enjoy your evening. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes Drinking with Jay.
Have a good night, Ian.
Thanks a lot, Jay. Appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having me.